1. This happened about 6 years ago when I was 14. I'm not sure what reminded me of this experience, but I thought I'd share it. It was a Sunday night around 7 p.m. or so, and I was at my church's West Campus for a youth group. At youth group, we would often play hide-and-seek at the end of the night while we waited for our parents to come pick us up. We always really enjoyed it because the West Campus has a lot of dark rooms in the basement to hide in. One room in particular was the costume room. The costume room was one of the last in the hallway and had 2 doors you could enter it from. One door was always locked for whatever reason. The doors were about 6 to 8 feet away from each other, so if you picked the locked door, you could get to the unlocked one pretty fast. Something else about the costume room is that it is very cluttered. There are racks upon racks of clothing and different props everywhere. As you can imagine, the room had a lot of places where you could easily hide. On this Sunday, we finished early, so we had about 30 minutes to play hide-and-seek, which we were all stoked about. And so the game began. We all quickly dispersed into the many rooms of the West Campus. As I ran down the hallway, many of the kids picked the closet rooms to hide in, which is also what I normally did, but everyone had beat me to these rooms, and I didn't want to hide with a bunch of other people. So I ran to the end of the hallway to the costume room. The first door was locked, so I went to the second one and entered the dark room. Once I was inside, I hurried through all the clothing racks and made my way to the back and hid behind some props. As I was hiding, I could hear doors opening and closing and walking around outside in the hall. I was so focused on these sounds that I almost didn't notice the sound of shuffling on the other side of the room. My first thought was that maybe someone else had gotten here to hide before I did, so I whispered very quietly, "Hey, who else is in here?" I got no reply. My second thought was that there was probably a mouse or some kind of animal in there that was moving around. That was until some costumes on the rack had fallen down. At this point, my heart is racing. I started to think that someone was trying to scare me, and frankly, it was working. I whispered again, "Please, who's in here? This isn't funny." Again, I got no reply. I worked up some courage and decided to slowly make my way over to the other side of the room and find who was trying to prank me. When I had gotten to the rack where the clothes had fallen from, there was no one there. I picked the clothes off the floor and hung them back up because I was just going to hide there now because I didn't want to move again and get caught by the seeker. By this time I had been hiding for maybe 5 or 7 minutes at most. Then suddenly someone started knocking on the door. When I tell you I nearly jumped out of my skin. At the same time the knocking happened, the props I had originally hid behind tumbled to the floor. I about had a heart attack. The knocking stopped. The sound that took its place was the sound of both door handles being wiggled, followed by, "Is someone in there?" I popped up out of my spot and ran to the door. It was locked. I ran to the other door. It was locked. And the thing about this is that there was only one key to unlock the doors, and the person who had it was not there that night. So how the hell did the unlocked door I had entered through magically become locked? By now I'm screaming and banging on the door with tears rolling down my cheeks. "Stop holding the door shut," my youth pastor yelled. I'm not holding it," I screamed at the top of my lungs. Then, to put a cherry on top, an entire rack fell over. Like not just the clothes on it, the whole rack. If I wasn't freaking the hell out, I definitely was now. I ran over to check the other door again, and now it was unlocked. So you bet your sweet ass I ran as fast as I could right past my youth pastor and friends right up the stairs and into the bathroom. About 2 minutes later, my friends followed me into the bathroom and asked me what had been so funny. "We heard you laughing down there. And why did you break those props?" They heard laughing coming from the room I was in, but I didn't hear laughing. And I definitely wasn't laughing in there. I told them what happened, but they didn't believe me. They thought I had planned this whole story to try and scare them. I don't know what else was in that room with me that night. By the sound of it, It got a good laugh scaring the shit out of me. 2. First, the backstory for context. At the time of my paranormal experience, the neighborhood that our house is in was not the safest. It was a very lower-income neighborhood in the heart of a large metropolitan city in the early stages of development and gentrification. When we moved in, 3 of the 5 houses bordering our property were legit drug houses. In my neighborhood at that time, it was best to keep to yourself, mind your own business, and not bring any attention to yourself. Our immediate next-door neighbors had constant traffic in and out of their house, and it was very obvious what was going on. Drugs. We always minded our business, but I still tried to be cordial and say hi and wave if my neighbor was outside at the same time as me. He was always polite to me, but we had very limited interaction. But sometimes some of the neighbor's customers would make me very uncomfortable by watching me, catcalling me or saying sexually and racially derogatory things if I was outside doing yard work, taking trash out, or getting out of my car. I would just ignore them and quickly go outside. But these interactions made me very uncomfortable, and I didn't feel safe if I was home alone without my husband. 2 weeks after the paranormal experience that I'm about to share, we woke up in the middle of the night to a lot of commotion, and when we looked out our bedroom window, I saw the cops raiding our neighbor's house. I found out later from news reports that the owners were charged with distributing heroin, powder cocaine, fentanyl, and crack cocaine. They also had a large stock of illegal firearms, a significant amount of cash, and one of the individuals living there was on the run, wanted on murder and robbery charges, and he was hiding out in this house during the paranormal incident that I'm about to describe. Now to the paranormal part. It was late one night, after midnight, and my husband and dog were asleep in our bedroom. I was in the kitchen and bent over the trash can to take the bag out and then take it out to our recycling bin on the side of my house so that the trash did not stink up my kitchen overnight. We made chicken fajitas that night, so we had the packaging from the raw chicken inside the trash can. To get to the bin outside, I just walked out my front door and to the side of the house due to the way our property is set up. When I was bent over the trash can, getting ready to pull the bag out, I felt what I thought was my husband walk right up behind me and lean over me like he was about to hug me. He's 6'3" and I'm 5'4", so he towers over me. I giggle and bend down further to dodge him and turn around quickly as I say, "I'll hug you first." And just as I turned around to go grab him around the waist and give him a bear hug, I saw a woman standing in the middle of my kitchen about 4 feet away from me. She instantly put her arms out towards me with her palms open like you would do when telling someone to stop, and she floated or glided quickly towards me while she mouthed, "No." And as soon as she got inches from me, she literally vanished into thin air. In one instant, she was gliding so quickly toward me, and the next she just disappeared. I did not hear anything, but her face had an expression of panic, and even though I did not hear her yell it, her mouth screamed no. This happened so fast, literally in the span of 2 or 3 seconds. The only details about her experience that I could recall was that she was completely solid, not transparent or translucent. She was wearing a long black long-sleeved dress with a white double-layered scalloped collar. The cuffs of her sleeve were slightly belled. There were little white buttons going down the entire length of the front of her dress. She was about my height. Her eyes were strikingly light blue, and she had long, very thick, tight, curly, and very unruly jet-black hair. She had pale skin, and she was floating a few feet above the ground. It happened so quickly, and those were the only details I could immediately remember. I was in such shock and disbelief. Immediately after she vanished, I stood still for maybe 1 or 2 seconds. Then I bolted past where she was just a few seconds before and ran into my bedroom screaming for my husband to wake up. He instantly jumped up out of bed and grabbed me and asked what was wrong, and I started crying. But all I could manage to sputter out was, "Someone is in our house." Before I could explain further, he grabbed his pistol from his nightstand and ran out of the bedroom to find the intruder. Our dog, a 90-pound pit bull who was in our bedroom at the time, also woke up and immediately started growling and barking at the entrance to our bedroom. He got in between me and the bedroom door frame and was barking and growling incessantly. I heard my husband calling for the dog for backup, and the dog refused to go to my husband, which is very out of character. My husband came back to our bedroom and said he didn't find anyone and that all of the doors and windows are locked and that there was no sign of a break-in. I told him he wouldn't find anything or anyone because it wasn't a person but a spirit. At this point, my skeptic husband rolled his eyes and started berating me for waking him up with stupid ghost stories. But when he saw that I was so legitimately scared and shaken up, he sat down and asked me to explain what happened. After I told him the story, he just chalked it up to me hallucinating due to stress for work and insomnia, and held me until I finally fell asleep. The next day I FaceTimed my mom and I told her what happened because I knew she would believe me, because she grew up in a haunted house and has seen apparitions before. I just needed someone to tell me I wasn't crazy or hallucinating. When I described what the woman looked like, she fell silent and had a look of shock on her face. She told me that the woman that I had described was my great-grandmother Gabriella, whom my mother was extremely close to. She died before I was born. I have never seen a picture of her because the only photos that the family had of her were in a box that was lost in the 50s during my grandparents' move to the States. However, my mother said that my grandmother still had my great-grandmother's dress that she made herself and wore almost every day. The next weekend, I took a trip a state away to see my grandmother with my mother, and I told her what happened. We spent the day in the attic looking for the dress. My mother found it in a suitcase, and when she pulled it out, I was in disbelief. It was the same dress that the woman I saw was wearing. Long black dress with slightly flared and belled sleeves, small white buttons along the length of the front of the dress, and the unmistakable double-layered white collar with the scalloped edges. After discussing everything with my mother and grandmother, we all believed that on that night my great-grandmother Gabriella stopped me from taking the trash outside to protect me from someone outside. It is the only thing I can think of, especially considering the contents crime and questionable people that were always present outside my front door so close to me. I truly believe that if I had taken the trash out that night, I may have seen something that I shouldn't have, a drug deal in progress, or been assaulted by one of the neighbor's customers that would threaten and sexually harass me. Luckily for us, after the drug raid, the neighbor's house was foreclosed. A developer bought the house and tore it down to build a new home. The neighborhood has done a 180 and been cleaned up, and our property has increased in value tenfold since this happened 4 years ago. It's a genuinely safe neighborhood now, but after that experience, I will never walk out my front door by myself in the middle of the night again, even if it means waking up to a stinky kitchen. 3. Not sure what information I can or can't share, so I'll drop hints without saying straight up where I was. A few weeks back, my fiancée surprised me with a birthday weekend away at a very old, very popular South Carolina city. She had the whole weekend planned with sightseeing and extravagant dinners, but as a history buff and someone who was genuinely curious, yet terrified of ghosts, I was most excited for the haunted bar tour she had booked. The irony is my encounter took place when we were preparing for the haunted ghost tour. The haunted bar tour was booked for a little later on in the afternoon, and since half the point of the tour was drinking, we decided to get the party started at lunch. My fiancée was able to land a lunch reservation at a pretty popular spot in this city that happens to bear the name of a dog that used to occupy the building. So, after we've been seated and got our drinks, twice I caught a sort of white mist at the very edge of my peripherals. Not smoke, but like a rich white cloud you could see at midday. I didn't think much of it, being that we were seated with my back to the door that led to the balcony that was also full of patrons, so waitresses were constantly running back and forth behind me. It could have been anything. After the second time, I asked my fiancée, "Did the waitress just spray Lysol behind me?" She said, "No, why do you keep looking over your shoulder?" Conversation at that point changed, and I pretty much forgot about the white mist. A short time later, after we finished our meal, the waitress came to clear the table. I wasn't paying attention to her as she was clearing the plates, but thinking back, I can't really explain what happened here. But it felt as if while the waitress was cleaning the table, she dropped a plate or a few utensils, because the sensation I felt was as if something splattered or hit against my leg from my ankle up to about my knee. Since I was in the middle of a conversation with my fiancé, my reaction was, dang, eye roll and grab my napkin, but when I bent down, my leg was as clean as a whistle. I also noticed the waitress was halfway back to the kitchen at this point. What the fuck? Whatever, we're going to be late, let's get the bill. First stop on the tour was a bar on the other side of the city. How the tour operated was we'd get to the haunted bar, the group grabs a drink, and after everyone gets back to the table, we get the history and why this particular location is haunted. Since my fiancé and I were one of the first ones back to the table, with just the guide there, I broke the ice with, "Hey, is that restaurant haunted?" The tour guide replied, "Oh, it's very haunted. It's actually the last stop in this tour." We giggled, and at this point I still didn't register what had happened. It didn't all click until we got to the end of the tour back at the restaurant, as we all gathered around the guide for this spiel. The gist of it was that it was named after the dog they found buried underneath the front entrance when they were renovating or something. He pointed to a painting someone did of the dog, and of course, it's a little white dog. The whiteness of his coat was on par with the white mist I saw earlier that day. He even went on to say the dog haunts the restaurant and will come by and rub up against your leg. Holy shit! Not to squeeze the juice out of this or turn it into a sob story, but to put it into context, about a year ago, my 2 family dogs died in a sudden, tragic, and super shitty way. And as someone who is an animal lover, who's had a pet their entire life, I thought about the 2 of them constantly. After everything clicked in my head, my only reaction was just something like a comforting warmth and a genuine flattery that the dog picked me to come by and rub up against. Maybe almost a sign that my dogs were okay, which is what I needed, because what hurt the most about losing my 2 family dogs were I never got to say goodbye to them. Something I was thankfully able to do with all previous pets. The encounter I had, as corny as it sounds, I guess was the closure I needed. 4. Hello. I'd like to start by saying that I don't particularly believe in ghosts or anything paranormal. However, I recently moved to a very small, sleepy town in New Mexico from New England, and there have been some events in my house that left me troubled. This all started around early October, when I had just moved to the house with my new puppy. It was early evening on a Friday, and due to my new job environment and puppy, I was exhausted. I had crawled into bed and was laying down when I noticed my dog was in a particularly adorable position on the bed next to me. I pulled my phone to take a picture, but as I swung the phone back in front of me, I swore I saw an old woman in a nightgown standing over our bed. It was only a split second, but she looked like a squat woman with salt and pepper hair and well-worn skin, and above all, she looked displeased. I chalked it up to hallucinations after a difficult and sleepless week, and quickly fell asleep. After all, I have a history of hallucinating when sleep-deprived, but I've only ever hallucinated after an extended period awake, so this confused me. Later that night, at about 3 a.m., my dog woke me to go to the bathroom. All was normal until I tried to get him to go back to bed. It's important to note that my dog's favorite spot in the house is the bed. It's where he runs if he's ever startled. I had forgotten all about my experience earlier in the night until I studied his face and saw fear. Nothing short of carrying him up the stairs could get him to follow me. The same thing happened again around 5 a.m. After that, it was a long time before I heard or saw anything besides a pretty steady schedule of nightmares, but this is normal for me. Sometimes, while waiting in the low-lit kitchen in the middle of the night for my dog to do his business, I would see figures shrouded in a shadow walking between the dark spots of the living room, but I again assumed it was just late-night hallucinations. A few months later in December, after we'd both settled in more, one of my dog's other favorite places became a bed I'd got for him I'd placed behind the couch. I got used to the pitter-patter sound of his footsteps on the tile behind the couch, and even found the sounds comforting. One night I was doing schoolwork on my couch. I noticed the pitter-patter sounded more like a scurrying back and forth. Confused, I swung my head to look behind the couch, but in doing so I saw my dog napping several feet away, and I jumped up and startled both of us. Just as I jumped up, the scurrying stopped. I don't have any signs of rodents in the house and have never heard or seen anything like that since. Later in the early spring of February, I had my most undeniable and startling encounter. It was late afternoon, still 2 hours or so before dusk. Me and my dog attempted to do our usual walk around the neighborhood, but when we left the house, he became very anxious, sat down and started to whine. I wasn't sure what was wrong, but he clearly wanted to go back inside, so I obliged. As soon as we walked back inside, I heard 2 incredibly loud booms that sounded sort of like doors slamming. I was convinced someone was inside the house, but I wasn't sure how that could be, considering we never left the front lawn. I threw open the door to the guest bedroom where the sound originated from and found nothing. I was so convinced someone was in the house, I dialed 911, but didn't end up calling. After waiting to hear for more noise, when I heard nothing, I settled down. I ran down the list of what could have caused the sound. Nothing fit that I could think of. While working in the house, I've also heard a voice whisper, "Hey," to me. And this week, I found the frame of my favorite art print tilted to an almost 45-degree angle. As I said at the beginning, I don't particularly believe in ghosts or the paranormal, but my time in New Mexico is changing my belief. If anybody thinks they can debunk this, I'm more than receptive. But what do you think? I'm new to all this, and I'm not sure what to think. 5. The story I want to bring up occurred around 2001 to 2002, when I moved to a Catholic private school just south of my original hometown. I've been bringing it up lately in conversations because I repressed it quite a bit, denoting any significance it may have had. The most paranormal thing I've had happen in my youth was hearing people calling my name while playing outside. Not that living near a large cemetery helped in any respect. Other than that, nothing in my life really was paranormal for many years. Nothing got strange in my life until 2020, when I finally began finding myself. Very long story. I digress. Seeing as I went to a Catholic school, every Friday there'd be a morning mass. I wasn't raised Catholic. I was brought up to be a Lutheran. However, once my mind got fixated towards the scientific, more so the physical, I began confronting the idea of God or a grand being. I did, however, have a belief in something about the paranormal, which I'm sure many can share with the same imposition people make. How can you believe in the paranormal and not God? It was more so me seeing how people behaved, and how such a simple assertion of loving something you can't see or accepting something you never witnessed. To me, it looked like an adult version of Santa Claus. This wasn't meant to be a theological discussion, so I digress yet again. While in the pews of the church, we were asked to kneel. I kneeled, which was oftentimes for 10+ minutes. Those kneeling devices weren't made out of memory foam, that's for certain. I began to feel strange one day, to which I closed my eyes and opened them up. Everything, and I meant everything, was as shiny as gold. Sparkling, pristine, just strange. Being only 10 or so, I figured it must have been a heat stroke or something health-related. Essentially trying to explain something inexplicable given my lack of understanding. I do, however, find it funny that a girl I was fond of walked with me to the church's basement to get a drink of water. Her name was Hope. It was a very strange sight to see, and it didn't last long. I never really thought about this memory until after my motorcycle accident that became just the accident I needed to really understand myself from a hindsight point of view, 2020. The accident very much caused my life to flash before my eyes, which also caused me to see paranormal occurrences, not to mention conjuring moments of medium-like abilities. Hell, I'd even say I was very much possessed at the end of 2020. Probably why I had these strange experiences, not to mention a profound unlocking of my memory. Even still, after the accident, I've stated that my mind went on a hyper-recording mode, never forgetting a single detail. Rather than being one of those cliché cliffhanger writers, I'll go into 2 specific occurrences I had in 2020 that I often tell people. One day, I was free of all pain, all fear, all constraint. It almost felt as if I was never alone. I walked out to my friend's patio, looked at the sun, and, well, it went from blood red to the brightest white I've seen. Thinking I had to see what I was being shown, I lay down in the porch in fear I might faint or something. I did the same thing, facing my head towards the sun. Only this time my eyes began to rapidly flicker until I saw what I can only explain as 2 static digital mists standing at my feet. Well aware I could see them, I decided to say to myself, either I'm going insane or this is real. One thing was for certain. I couldn't tell the soul what I was seeing unless I wanted to be considered insane. About 3 weeks later, I was sitting at a table with a friend of mine and his girlfriend. I had him read something I'd written in the last week, curious to see if he'd have the same reaction another friend of mine had. However, while he was reading it, clear as day a single static mist appeared behind him and then quickly vanished. Yep, I'm going insane, I thought. That was until his girlfriend turned to me. Did you just frickin' see that? The moment of medium ability came when I was visiting a friend of mine at a place I now work at. We went to the basement for a cigarette while I was in a state of existence I can't put into words. Think of it like finally meeting your wife and seeing your fate, to put it all lightly. In my mind, while wandering the basement, I had a feeling as if to be burning, thinking to myself, did someone burn down here? The friend I was with then proceeded to mention, out of the blue, did you know a homeless guy burned alive down here? So yeah, that accident opened up a part of my mind that wasn't open prior to it. Though there were strange signs throughout 2020 that aligned perfectly. Like the day I gave myself a scar that formed into a heart after a day, which was well before my accident. I talked to a lot of people on spirituality and paranormal tags on Omegle, and a lot of them report seeing orbs when I'm mid-discussion. None of it comes as a surprise anymore. Today, while out with my family, my mother tells me and my grandmother that she doesn't like sleeping in her room because something is watching her. This was just hours ago she said this too. The experiences I've personally had were absolutely insane. It's the ones that others see that happen that really make for a connection, rather than trying to tell someone a moment you've seen a UFO. To which I finish with one of the strangest moments I've experienced with both my mother and 2-year-old sister. It was 2020, only about a month or 2 after my accident. I was standing by the garage door when I heard my voice call my sister's name from around the house. My sister thought it was me while my mother looked at me in complete confusion. All this paled in comparison to the plethora of experiences I've had, which all really took place between late August of 2020, finishing on my birthday, December 18th. Remember how I said I held this stuff in as not to be called insane? Well, it found my weakness through a woman's evil eye. I'd like to go into the subject and idea of possession, but that's a subject I'll ponder later on. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories, episode 277. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. I'd appreciate it if you took this video and threw it at people. Wait, no, that's not how that should be phrased. I'd appreciate it if you very kindly shared the video with friends and family. Don't throw it at them, that would be rude. Right, let's see. We do have a birthday shouty-outy to do today. Sorry, I forgot how to English for a second. Right, we do have a birthday shout-out to do today. Words, eh? Trouble. Right, and today's birthday shout-out goes to Margaret. Margaret is 64 years old today. Right. Good news, Margaret, as your birthday does fall on the weekend, you get to celebrate from now right through to the following Friday, so that's technically more than a week. But don't tell anyone, we'll keep that on the QT. Right. And before we go, we're going to sing Happy Birthday to Margaret. If you are joining in, I'd make sure you're alone, because it would look very weird if you're listening at work and you suddenly start burst into a rendition of Happy Birthday. To no one there, your co-workers will think you're very strange indeed. Of course, if they already think you're strange, then by all means have at it. I'm not here to tell you what to do. Okay, so here we go. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Margaret. Happy birthday to you. And I hope you're going to take great care of yourself, Margaret. I hope you're going to make sure you get treated, because if you can't spoil yourself on your birthday, when can you spoil yourself? Do all the good things that you tell yourself you don't have time to do. Take a day at least and treat yourself. Or over a week, as I always encourage. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.